There for a while we didn't get to have a lot of these, Brandon. I think we were too busy, but it's a little colder now, and you know what? There's no better way to warm up than with some good conversation and some good whiskey. And we've got another flight night, as it's Jonathan here with your boy Brandon. And who's our guest, Brandon? Do you want to do the intro, even though I made him say his name?
Mr. Josh Prete from Woodinville Whiskey.
Hi, Jen.
Yeah,
Josh.
welcome. Yeah,
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we've been dabbling, sampling the juice from you guys for quite a while now, so it's good to have you guys on.
Yeah, appreciate being part of it. You guys picked a good time to have us. We have some fun limited releases out right now that we're gonna get to taste through.
I'm excited because
can't wait.
The 3 limited releases that we are going to try along with the flagship tonight, the lineup is looking good. So a lot to live up to, I think.
Oh yeah, they won't disappoint. Don't worry, you guys picked some good ones.
Nice.
Well, before we dive into what you do and the history of Woodinville, which is out of Washington State, the Great Northwest, Josh is the Northeast sales manager for them. So before I ask you about that, let's do the first pour of some the flagship bourbon. That's
cool.
Your everyday drinker, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, pouring along.
So what can you tell us about this guy?
Yeah, so this is our flagship. This is what put Woodinville on the map. This is what won Best Straight Bourbon at San Francisco World Spirit in 2020. This is what Brett and Orwin, our founders, set out to do, which is Pacific Northwest whiskey done with a kind of point of origin respect and making something that really does, at 5 years, just punch well above its weight class, So we are working right now with a high rye mash bill. So we're doing 72 corn, 22 rye, 6 malted barley. This has been proofed to 90, and it is, again, 5 years of age. And the fun of this whiskey, and we'll get into it more throughout the conversation, is that we're working with heritage grains to Washington State, which really creates a distinctive profile, on the palate and on the nose. Because you hear high rye, but this maybe isn't exactly what you think when you think high rye.
Yeah, I was going to say the 22-6 combo is different as well.
Absolutely.
Can you repeat the mash bill one more time again?
Sure. 72 corn, 22 rye, 6 malted barley.
Okay.
Heritage varietals for all of those that are, have long time been cultivated in Washington State and really have been just kind of built to grow well in that region. So, I don't want to lead you guys too much, form your own opinions on the nose and the palate. But, of course, we're getting some of those traditional bourbon notes in there on the nose. Of course, caramel, brown sugar. I get that really, bright, fresh vanilla bean. And then one of those things I think that is Woodinville specific is there's really nice fresh apple on here, kind of like Red Delicious.
I do get some. I get more of some citrus on there, kind of almost like a lemon peel almost. It's maybe some Granny Smith apple in there too, maybe a little bit. It's just kind of like that, that kind of like that citrusy kind of tartness, smell.
Brandon knows his apples. He
exactly right.
Recently.
Oh, amazing. Should get a good whiskey up there. There's some fun whiskey being made up there now.
Yeah, there's some good stuff up there. They do. There's a couple spots that I like to go to get some good store picks. Some good private selection barrels up there that they do. But no, they're coming on. They're known for their craft beer, but they're coming. They're starting to do some really good stuff on the whiskey game.
Well, I was going to say, Washington, the Pacific Northwest has kind of been known for those hops and different things, and clearly you can tell those varieties that they're pulling from the ground are hearty up there for that unique seasons that y'all have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Brandon, you kind of pulled it right away. For me, citrus is another through line for our entire range, like a candied citrus, candied orange, kind of like a flamed orange zest. That's definitely something that I get on the palate here as well. That really makes this a distinctive bourbon, against the
Absolutely.
category.
I was trying to think of
Absolutely.
what I was getting there at on the palate, because I was like, it's not. I wasn't getting apple, but I was getting kind of something, that rye kind of giving it a little. Not, I don't want to say like
Hmm.
spice, like baking spice or anything like that, but a little bit of, like you said, toasted, heated, zest or something. And the Flagship has been one of, I think, both of our favorites for a while, if I'm not mistaken. Although it's been a minute since I've had Woodinville, the Flagship.
Mhm.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Thanks for the support. It's always great to hear gentlemen as
Yeah.
well versed in the world of American whiskeys as yourself turning to Woodinville,
Yeah.
I mean,
the
I did
the little
miss
distillery that
Woodinville's
could out of
beer,
Washington
so
State.
I remember first seeing it. I started seeing it here locally doing, like Total Wine, and everybody was doing barrel picks. And
Yeah.
I remember I bought and I don't know how many bottles I bought. I bought different variations of it, between the 4 year and there's a 5 year. I think I bought, a couple, but I enjoyed all of them.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. 5 years has always been our minimum age.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
across the line, even with our
Okay.
private barrels.
Mm.
I was gonna say,
And again, it's been a minute.
Sure.
just, I was gonna say, just to
Have
see,
you?
when you talk about that 5 year mark. I mean, that's impressive to hold back that long, because, as everyone knows,
Hmm.
time, it takes time for you can't speed up the process. I mean, you can try, but I don't
Sure.
recommend it. But um, you know,
Mhm.
the, a 5 year Flagship is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, that's a really awesome point. Brett Orlin, and as we get into the history of the distillery, Dave Pickerel, who was, paramount in getting Woodinville off the ground. He worked very closely with Brett Orlin for the first couple of years. Um, it was really important that we hit the markets with only grain that was grown from our partner farm, and only stuff that we, from milling through the distillation through to the aging, had done everything, in-house. So there's never been a sourcing of juice. There's never been a sourcing of grain outside of our partnerships. So that is a way that, it took a long time for them to get out to the market. This was established in 2010. They didn't leave Washington until 2018, so it was that patience. And of course, you have to keep the lights on. So there is the rarefied vodka that Washington natives still seek. It's really delicious. If you ever come across it, I highly recommend, even though, as whiskey folks, we turn our nose up at vodka. It's worth a pour. But that was one of the few ways that they were able to keep the lights on while they were waiting for this whiskey to come of age.
Nice.
Well, it's
Yeah.
good whiskey, Brandon. What are you thinking so far on pour number one here?
I mean, there's nothing to complain about. I mean, if you just want something that's your old number one fastball, this is it. Like, it's for me, it drinks a little bit hotter, a little bit spicier than 90 proof,
Hmm.
which is a good thing to me. I think I've mentioned this several times in the past about others, but it's at 90 proof, even the most seasoned bourbon whiskey connoisseur, they look at 90 proof, and a lot of people turn their nose up at it because, you know, from what my experience is, all the more seasoned veterans, if you will, that like that knows that's into the whiskey game, they prefer that higher proof stuff, 100, 115, or even barrel proof or whatever. But this is a 90 proof that you shouldn't shy away from, because to me it drinks between that 95 and 100 proof to me, which is a good thing, because for me, you're picking up that much more flavor from it. It ain't just straight burn alcohol. Like it's just flavor notes, flavor notes, flavor notes. So
I was gonna say it's very
I think
flavorful
it's
for that
I
90
think it's
proof.
really good, especially at 5 years, 90 proof. Especially with all the flavor notes you get off the nose and off the pour itself. Like I mean, yeah, like it makes me really, really, really excited to try the stuff we got coming at 105 and 107. So no, this is really good. Like you can't beat it.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I
Yeah,
think, yeah, to your point, that 90 proof is kind of a sweet spot for, less seasoned whiskey drinkers. It's approachable, but it
yeah,
also still has a good enough backbone for,
correct,
us who live in the whiskey world more regularly.
correct. Because
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
there's
guessing.
a lot of 90 proofs out there that's like that. Don't get me wrong, they're okay, but a lot of them are
Mm-hmm.
really kind of like that 90 proof. It's kind of like that. There's really no flavor. It's kind of watered down a little bit. But I mean, this packs a really good flavor punch. That
Mm-hmm.
you said, I think you mentioned it earlier that it punches above its weight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, and it
And I'm
absolutely.
stands
guessing
up
it
to a
goes
little
well in a cocktail.
dilution. Yeah, that's
I'm
exactly where I
guessing
was
this thing
going with
plays well
it.
in a cocktail with that 90 proof and a little bit of heat and
100%.
flavor.
Yeah, this will be a perfect old fashioned candidate.
Right, because as we were mentioning, like those flavor notes, we were coming up with candied
Mhm.
orange and citrus and cinnamon and clove.
Yeah,
We weren't coming up with like that big kind of vanilla note.
mhm.
So
Yeah,
sometimes an old fashioned can get just like, for me, it's sweet on sweet. But
yeah,
this is such like a crisp, bright, bourbon
mhm.
that it does stand up really well to those classic cocktails, those classic whiskey cocktails. And that dilution, like we're saying, that's 90 proof is not afraid of a little dilution. So
No,
it's a great cocktail base.
yeah, 100%.
Very, very versatile pour. And I'm guessing, for your line of work, that's helpful to have something like that to start off. And can you talk about what made you join up with the Woodinville team? Because as we talked about before the show, you're based in the Northeast in New York. Woodinville's out of Washington. So how did you end up with this amazing company?
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect segue since we're talking about cocktails. I come from a cocktail background. I think a lot of people in this line of work do. I was, running bar programs and in the hospitality world for many years. And luckily, here in New York, there are some of the best drink makers in the world who are always looking for that next great, exciting thing, that next cocktail component that's going to set them apart, that they can really play with and make their own. And Woodinville really has um, been championed by the cocktail creators of New York since it launched here in 2020. So, you know, being in that world at the time, I knew of Woodinville. I knew that I liked to play with Woodinville, in my bar program. And, it's kind of the natural progression of bartender life. You make your way from bartender, bar manager, then you find yourself into brand work. Next I'm going to get my, my real estate license, and then I'll have done the entire circle that we all do. um,
Absolutely.
yeah. No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm sticking with whiskey. It's way more fun than real estate. But so that was it. It was, I was getting really excited at the opportunity to kind of work more on the education side, more on the brand side, and then Woodinville just felt like the perfect fit because my specialty has always kind of been in whiskey bars and whiskey cocktails. And, as soon as I saw that Woodinville was expanding into New York and expanding this team to the Northeast, I jumped at the chance because it's how could you not want to work with this brand? I think that the sky's the limit for this distillery.
Absolutely. I don't blame you. I mean, I would have done the same.
Yeah. Right.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
if we could find it, maybe we
Yeah.
we'd be doing the same thing. On our way to
Yeah.
our real estate license.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned that you're the Northeast sales manager, and you come from kind of that bar background. So what, we've talked to national brand ambassadors. People know kind of what a distiller does, those type of things. But what's
Mhm.
your kind of role? Like, what what does your quote unquote day to day life look like? Are you just going out and trying to get people to pick up Woodinville, like stores? Or are you going to bars hoping to expand the program? What does that role look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It is certainly a lot of that. There's no question. It's the sales manager kind of a role. I know it's a bit of a hybrid role, so there is a brand ambassadorship, bent to it, no question. So there's absolutely hosting events and doing educations and everything along those lines that we know, brand ambassadors to be. But then there is that sales component where you're kind of the boots on the street. You're making those connections. It's really, at the end of the day, just forging relationships, right? You're kind of building partner accounts, be them bars, restaurants, hotels, stores, and you're just fostering those relationships. Maybe it's just like, planting a seed and you're getting Woodinville into a new placement, into like a cool new cocktail bar, or it's, really fostering long-term relationships with accounts that you've been partnered with and that have championed Woodinville for years. And then it's working with the local distributors, it's working with the local suppliers, it's being just the point person for Woodinville in a world where there's a lot of other people also working with Woodinville, just in different capacities, So the Woodinville buck ends with me in the Northeast, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Nice.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's a fun gig, and as we're trying through,
Yeah.
there's the next bottle that we're gonna go to is the 8-year limited edition, which I believe sold out. So if you can find it somewhere, props to you. But can you tell us a little bit about this bad boy black label here that comes in at 100 proof?
So exciting! I love this whiskey. This, I've been with Woodinville for about 3 years now, and this I think is like Brett and Orland's mic drop. This is the expression that I think is really going to catapult us onto that like really nationally recognized stage, and it's already started, I think, with getting double gold at San Francisco World Comp. The Ascots gave us double platinum with this one. And this has been a long time in the making, It's 8-year age, so of course at least 8 years have gone into, when this was first conceived. But when we talk about the cooperage system that Brett and Orland, partnering with Independent Stave Company, selected for this, that's another 2-year process. So this whiskey is really 10 plus years in the making. And now we're talking about 2014. That's only 4 years into, Woodinville's conception. So this is something that well predates Woodinville's national expansion, or, Woodinville being kind of on this national stage. So this was something really, smart and labor intensive that Brett and Orland set out to do very early on. So what makes this different than that core expression that we just tasted is the mash bill, for one. So we're working 55 corn, 35 rye, and then 10% malted barley. So, rather high rye. And I think that that's really special because as we talk about, again and again, the heritage varietal of grain, our rye varietal is so distinctive against the category. I know we're not tasting it tonight, but we have 100% rye that truly drinks unlike any other rye on the market. It is just, the spice is totally different, and I think that comes through here as well. This is spicy, but it's a different type of spice because we're not as black pepper forward, kind of more cinnamon, coriander, cardamom. And then, of course, we're going to get some of those, more traditional bourbon notes, especially with the amount of oak extraction that we're getting from those 8 years. But that brings me to the second aspect of the production of this whiskey that sets it apart from our core range, the cooperage, which I kind of spoke to. We are working with Independent Stave Company to create this barrel, which is a distinctive cooperage from our flagship, in that we season the oak staves for 2 full years in the open elements before giving them a heavy toast and then a light number 1 char. Whereas our core range is toasted and then has a heavy number 4 char. So this is, a light number 1 char is almost unheard of in the current marketplace. That's a much more traditional style of kilning a barrel, and so to bring that back, just to get as much oak extraction as we are with this really amazing, yeah, exactly. You can see the color side by side with this really distinctive mash bill. I think it really speaks to kind of the foresight that Brett and Orland had in laying these barrels down. I'll let you guys, what are you guys coming up with on here, on the nose, on the palate?
Tons of flavor is what I get. On the nose, I get like a deep, for me, I don't get pepper. I don't get that peppery from rye. Like, I don't know what it is about my taste buds and my palate, but anytime I love rye. Like, rye is my go-to. Because to me, rye has that sweeter taste to it. For me, I don't get that peppery, spicy, burn your face off top whiskey, that deep burn from the rye. I get obviously the nice gentle burn from the whiskey, but when it comes to rye, I get that really nice sweetness to balance everything out, and that's why I gravitate, to the rye whiskey bourbon itself. But for this, I get kind of like that deep, like caramelized sugar smell, like a deep, like a molasses, like kind of like that. Just that's what I get on the nose.
You're in the kitchen cooking.
Yep,
That's what I get on this.
Always,
you know what I mean? Like
always,
it's perfect for this time of year. Like you're making cookies and having some.
Now I've only had one sip of this, and the first sip I got, the first tasting note that I got off of it was kind of like a cinnamony brown sugar maple syrup type taste. And I don't know, but to me, I don't know how you can't like all those things, but I mean, I love all those things, but that's what I get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now it smells like maple syrup to me. But now that I say that, I just talked myself into it. But I don't know how or why that is happening. But
I think maple syrup is a good pull. That's certainly something that I find with a lot of our range, and I think as we move forward, that's going to be recurring. You touched on one thing that I also want to mention. This is 100 proof, whereas our core was 90. And, again, just that 8-year, it really, those kind of toasty, like you were saying, caramelized notes, like creme brulee, that's like right up front and center. Yeah. Brandied cherry is really nice. There's a really nice kind of dark red fruit to it. Again, on the nose, I'm getting apple, but maybe it's a little bit more like stewed apple versus like kind of the fresh apple of the first pour.
Yep.
And then that high rye, there's a little bit of like a spearmint kind of minty note.
Yeah,
more on the nose than anything.
Cinnamon baking spice on this one, but it makes sense. It's a totally different mash bill. It's a, I guess to some degree, why did they kind of do the two different mash bills? Was it two different things trying out and just one out on this one than the other? Or?
That's a good question. Brett and Orland aren't afraid of experimentation. They aren't afraid of, we're going to get into finishes moving forward. We're going to taste like our one and only source whiskey after this. So they're not afraid to mix things up and just see what works, So they're always playing with different mash bills. And I really think that a lot of the thought process going into why this mash bill for this expression was because of they knew that they were going for a longer age period on it, and they knew that they were working with this really untraditional cooperage system with that light char. And so I think that this higher rye really plays well against those two things, and I think that was just speaking to their whiskey smarts, that they knew that something like this would play really well in this kind of different production setting.
Yeah, because I love this pour. This is like right on my alley. Like Brandon said, we love that high rye and bourbon. We love rye and rye whiskey in general, and it's unique. And then to hear the story behind it of the 10-year process. Truly, I mean, it's aged 8 years, but it's a 10-year process. I mean, 2 years for the barrels to come alive is a long time. Again, we were talking about that first one. That 5 years for a flagship is crazy. This process is double in an almost insane way when you think about time and money.
Yeah.
And
this is.
sorry, continue.
No, I was commenting how good this is. Like this is. It's,
well, please keep on going then.
No, it's really good. Wow. I mean, you called it. You said this is kind of like their mic drop. Like this is like hopefully this will take it even further on the map. So, I don't know, man. This is good.
Yeah, and I think like you both said at the beginning of this of tasting this expression, like it sold out right away. People are excited about this. The press has been unbelievable on this. The sales side of my role was really challenged by this expression because everyone wanted it, and it came into New York and sold out within 3 days of landing here, and it's very limited as well. So. It is just, I think, exactly what, the whiskey community wants from Woodinville, which is just really thoughtful, craft whiskey that's unlike any other, whiskey regionally or just in the glass. So I think that's why everyone got super excited by this. And just, Jonathan, to go back to your point for a second, with this being a 10-year process, being almost double our core expression cooperage is also an incredibly long, labor-intensive cooperage. We're seasoning those barrels for a year and a half before giving them the toast and then the number 4 char. So that's 6.5 minimum right there as well. So I know these guys cut no corners. It's unbelievable.
And it's paying off. Like, I mean, that's, you cut corners, especially in this market, in this type of climate, you're not gonna do well. But I mean, you're doing things right. It's showing, literally.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I gotta ask, this is clearly they're thinking far out. This was a 10-year thing that they started back in 2014, even the 6.5 years on the flagship. So. Is the 8-year limited edition, coming back again in another limited edition form next year? Like, what's the not to put you on the spot, but we're putting you on the spot early here. Hopefully, you've had enough.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question, and this is exciting. This is an exciting kind of news. The 8 years coming back next year as a 9-year. So what's in the barrel now, this exact expression, same cooperage, same mash bill, is coming back next year with an extra year of age on it.
Let's go.
And the other age statement that's coming out next year, and Brandon, as a rye guy, you're going to appreciate this. Our rye is going to be released as an 8-year next year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Excited.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, justifiably so. I will tell you won't be disappointed.
No. And is that the 100% rye?
It's the 100% rye, and it's with our traditional cooperage. So it's our core expression rye with an extra 3 years on it.
Nice.
Yeah. I know what we're doing next year this time.
Yep. 100%. We gotta come back and review it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of that and segue into it, just tell us and tell all the fans and the listeners, how did Woodinville, how did it get its start? Like, how did it come to be? I know you've talked a lot, about the cooperage and about, and how y'all do things, but just what was the brainchild of it and how did things just come together?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we talk about Woodinville whiskey, it's best to kind of put it in a time and place. And that place, believe it or not, is Woodinville. So Woodinville, Washington is where our distillery is. So it's a really beautiful wine town at the end of the day. So there's about 80 wineries from throughout Washington State that have tasting rooms there. Our distillery is immediately across the street from Chateau Ste. Michelle's Vineyards. That's a juggernaut. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that winery. So when we think of, why and where Woodinville got its start, it's this town. And why we're there is because our founders, Brett Carlisle and Orlin Sorensen, are born and raised in, or at least in the near surrounding areas of Woodinville. And they're whiskey guys in a wine town at the end of the day. And they're entrepreneurs, and they're just real smart, but also really creative guys who always wanted to build something for themselves in their hometown. And that opportunity came for them when Washington legalized spirit distillation for the first time in 2008. So that's, again, we talk about there's not a lot of Washington, Jonathan, you brought up earlier, like hops, and obviously the Pacific Northwest is really known for its craft beer scene, but there's not a lot of recognition yet on the national stage of distilled spirit from Washington State. And that's because it's an emerging market there. 2008 is not that long ago yet, especially if we're talking about things that need age. Yeah, exactly. Right. So Washington legalizes spirit distillation. Brett and Orlin quit their jobs, cash in their 401ks, sell their homes, put all the chips on the line to open this distillery in their hometown, to create a true point of origin whiskey distillery in their wine town. Very quickly realized they don't exactly know what they're doing. Knowing good whiskey doesn't mean you know how to make good whiskey. But they were very fortunate that concurrently Dave Pickerel, juggernaut in the craft American whiskey world, I'm sure a name that has been brought up many times on this podcast, he had recently left Maker's Mark after, making Maker's Mark what it is today. So he was sought after by all of these small distilleries that were popping up around the country to consult, because he was going back to consulting, which, as we all know, was what he was doing before he was brought in-house for Maker's Mark. So he was back out, free agent, looking to consult, looking for the right projects, and Brett and Orlin were able to, after he ignored them, after he ignored their emails and their calls, which I don't think they should take personally. By all accounts, that was just very much who Dave was. They were able to more or less corner him at Whiskey Fest in Chicago, and were like, please just come out and see what we're trying to do. So he did, and he was really excited by what they were trying to do. So he signed on to work with them for a year to get things off the ground, and then he enjoyed working with them so much that he ended up staying on for a second year of his own accord. So the first 2 years of this, getting this concept off the ground, getting Brett and Orlin's vision to come to life were very much shepherded by Dave. And of course, as we all know, after Woodinville, Dave has gone on to work on some absolute juggernauts, Whistle Pig. I'm in New York, so Hill Rock is a big one here. Blackened with Metallica. And he just is, the godfather of craft American whiskey. I think he's officially worked on 40 craft distilleries. Unofficially, I think all of them, at least in some capacity. And he really, really championed Woodinville well beyond he left, well beyond him leaving Woodinville. Again, being based in New York, I've heard stories time and again when he was out here working on Hill Rock. He was telling all of the local whiskey societies, look out for Woodinville, keep your eye on Woodinville. He played an integral part in Moet Hennessy acquiring Woodinville. It was kind of based off of his recommendation that Moet Hennessy went out to even see what Brett and Orlin were up to. I don't even believe that Woodinville was on their radar before Dave brought it to them. So, not only, yes, he's a big name, and he has done amazing things for this category and for American whiskey at large. But this is one. I'm not saying that he picks favorites. I can't put any words in his mouth. Unfortunately, we lost him. But I know that this was one that he was very excited and passionate about. And everything that Brett and Orland are doing to this day, they are still at the distillery every day. They are still working in the same capacities that they did since day one, and everything is still done to the specifications that Dave, Brett, and Orland set out on day one to do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's what I appreciate, about this brand is because, the founders, the original starters of it, they're still there, hands on, like doing things day to day, and you're doing it in a pretty prestigious wine region. It's like somebody it's just like saying the three of us or four of us are going to go, or whatever. We're going to go out to Napa Valley and just start a bourbon or whiskey company and try to make it work. Like, it's going to be hard.
It is very much that, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, because it is kind of like that little wine travel. You say you're into it? You say you're down? You're ready? You want to give it a try?
I'm in.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Why not? Like,
yeah.
Because you mentioned it a minute ago. It's like, they started it. They didn't really know what they were doing, and they just put all their chips on the table and let's see what happens. If I had $1 for every time that John and I has talked to a brand that said the same thing, it's like, we didn't know what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
We watch YouTube videos,
Mm-hmm.
and guess what? And they're, killing it. So I don't know. Maybe we should do it. Maybe we don't know what we're doing either. So let's just
you guys seem like you got it figured out pretty well. I don't know.
We get to drink fun things. I know that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, with that said, let's what's next? What's our next pour?
So I think we're on
the bottle.
What is it? Is it the Founder's Fund?
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Yeah, this is really exciting.
12 years, I believe. 107.
Mm-hmm.
So we're steadily climbing up the proof.
Yeah, this is, I think, our highest of the night because the next one we do a slight dip, but we're staying in the 105. But I think it's worth, even though we're going to kind of recess a little on the next one with proof, it's worth trying this one before we get into the finishes.
Yeah.
Completely different nose, I will say that.
Right. I mean,
so what we got? Ooh, good bottle pop.
Across the board, this could not be more different than everything else that we're going to talk about tonight. And that's kind of exciting for me, This is, again, Brett and Orland, innovators, unafraid to kind of take chances, to try something different, to kind of maybe shake up what you think of when you think of Woodinville whiskey, right? Because you think of grain to glass Pacific Northwest, but this is sourced whiskey. This is the first, time that they've ever found barrels that they wanted to put under the Woodinville whiskey moniker, the Woodinville whiskey brand. And I think that speaks to just how special this whiskey is. They wouldn't take that leap without this being something that's really distinctive and unique and just truly one of a kind. So I'll speak to the, it's kind of, this is a wild one. So I'll speak to the history of it and what this whiskey is. But if you guys want, what are you feeling? I see you both nosing it. What are you thinking?
Like I said, totally different than the other. Because I even went back to the 8-year and it's still sitting in the 8-year is so nice because you can just sniff the empty glass and it still smells fantastic. But like you get a lot of rye on that one. I don't smell a ton of anything baking really going on this one.
No, I don't either. But after the first sip, I know it's 12 years. At
least.
And this is a cliche, I know, but it, even at 107 at 12 years, it's, I mean, super smooth.
And it wasn't
Like,
what I was expecting based off the nose.
No. No, I thought it was going to be a little bit, give that, that good burn, but flavorful off the age and the proof. But I mean, if you blindfolded, blind taste test, put this next to if you put it next to the 100 proof 8 year, like this is smoother than that. Now don't get me wrong, that is fantastic what we just had at the 8 year 100 proof, but this is super super smooth.
Yeah, and I think, like you're saying, it's Jonathan. You were kind of saying you're not getting that huge rye spice on it. The mash bill is different. I don't have the mash bill to disclose, but it is, for me, on the nose, like that dried fruit, kind of dried flower thing going on. There is like a potpourri moment to it, and definitely baking spice and caramel, of course. I do get a little rye spice on the palate myself, but definitely kind of, dark cherry, Bing cherry, toasted oak, toasted kind of caramel, vanilla maybe.
And I think that's what threw me off, because you don't get that on the nose, whereas you kind of smell that on the other two, which makes sense. They're high rise. But when I tasted it, I was like, that's more baking spice than I was ever expecting based off of that nose. Like it was, like I said, thought going in was not the same thing as when it went down. So
right,
like,
yeah. So now I don't,
like, not in a bad way. Like
I don't know how
surprise.
much you know about this whiskey, but it is really a rather interesting story. Not just how Orland found this whiskey, but also what is in our glass right now. So, I had mentioned Woodinville has been acquired by Moet Hennessy. They have very few whiskeys in their portfolio at the moment, right? Up until very recently, Woodinville was Moet Hennessy's only American whiskey. That's now changed with the launch of Sir Davis, right? Which is, again, I love Sir Davis. I think it's fabulous stuff. It is absolutely something completely different than what Woodinville is doing. So aside from that, it's Glenmorangie and Ardbeg.
On stage, singing too.
No, not yet. I haven't seen it yet. I've had some karaoke nights out in Washington. They've never been part of it, suspiciously. They're holding out for the big bucks. But so, now Orland and Brett being some of the main whiskey players in a supplier portfolio that's predominantly known for, champagne and cognac, they have been able to kind of expand beyond just Woodinville. And so while Orland was kind of working on these innovation projects in the whiskey space with Moet Hennessy, he discovered these barrels in a Tennessee rickhouse. And so now these are 12-year-old whiskeys from Tennessee, but they with a bourbon mash bill, but they did not undergo the Lincoln process, so no charcoal filtration. So let's go back, right, 12 years. Here we are, we're taking a bourbon mash in Tennessee, not doing a charcoal filtration, and we're putting them in this distillate into recharged barrels, which means that they're taking used barrels, scraping the barrels, and then retoasting and recharring the barrels. So this was very much just a experiment for the people that were creating this whiskey. Now, 6 years into that whiskey being aged in Tennessee, 15-year-old Indiana whiskey, we all know what that means, was blended in a small amount to these barrels. 4% of the overall volume of these barrels was blended in 15-year-old Indiana whiskey. So then these barrels sat for another 6 years. So that was 15 years at the time, right? So now there's 21-year-old, whiskey in here, and then there's 12-year-old whiskey in here. And so Orland found this while, he was kind of just putting his whiskey acumen to good use with Moet Hennessy, and he fell in love with this whiskey. How could you not? I mean, I'm in love with this whiskey. He took it back to Brett. Brett was in love with this whiskey. So they decided to release it under, Woodinville Whiskey. And I think, again, we said mic drop for the 8 year. This is kind of a mic drop from my perspective for just in general what Woodinville isn't afraid to do. We're known as point of origin grain to glass whiskey, and we're known to do that at the top of the category. Well, guess what? We can also do sourced whiskey pretty darn well, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I hope you guys agree. So it's a bit of a convoluted history as to how this whiskey has found its way into your glass and how we're talking about it right now, but it's rather interesting.
How does he first off, who does the weird thing of supercharging a barrel to begin with, and then how does he find it? Come on now, it's Where's Waldo? That doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And I knew that we were going to like it for two reasons. We were excited about it, is because not only because it's you guys, and for one, but B, is that I saw that 96% of it was coming from Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And John and I have tremendous success on finding good juice from Tennessee. And and I don't know what it is, but we just, they're doing some good things down there with the whiskey, the bourbon mash bills, whatever it is they're just doing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we know what Indiana does with theirs,
Mm-hmm.
but come on, man.
What's in Indiana? I'm confused.
And listen, they make amazing whiskey, I think that in general the climate is kind of going back towards everyone's enjoying.
Yeah.
There's no pretense anymore. It's good whiskey.
It's true.
If it's good, it's good. I
exactly.
Think now where we're headed.
That's exactly right.
And I love too. They calling it the Founders Find is pretty ingenious too, because now that opens up doors. If they find something again, great. If they don't, that's okay too. It was a limited release. Limited releases, if you go by the true definition, they're limited, and who knows when it'll come back. So I really love that thinking and that approach from Brett and Orland and just the whole Woodinville team, because there's a lot of true thought in everything they do. Correct.
I appreciate that. And just so I might as well rattle it off just so we don't all seem like the only three that love this whiskey. It has hit really big. I bring up San Francisco World Spirit Competition again. It got double gold. It was one of the 4 finalists for best in category for American blended whiskey. I'll bring up Ascot's again. It got double platinum. It was one of the finalists out of the 900 whiskeys that were tasted at the Ascot's this year for best in show. And Fred Minnick, who has been an amazing supporter of Woodinville, and I know it's a familiar name to everyone here, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, he named it his #1 best in show whiskey for this year's Ascot, for this year's American Spirit Council of Tasters.
Oh, damn.
So,
nice.
Yeah. So he's in support of that, he actually was at our distillery for our harvest release, which is our once a year in the fall we do a harvest release. Yep. He was there to help launch this whiskey and the next one, which we're tasting, which was our harvest release for the year. And then he and his barrel picking team also picked a couple of private barrels while he was out there, which is great, which was really cool. So he's been a great champion of Woodinville's, and anyone that knows him, knows that he knows his whiskeys. I like to think, at least.
Legend.
And he does not like vodka.
No.
Nope.
No.
Maybe he'd like the Woodinville vodka. I shouldn't.
You gotta make sure that you plant that seed next time.
Yeah. I'll leave that to I'll leave that to braver souls than me.
So I mentioned.
Oh, go for it.
Go ahead, yeah. So I mentioned that we talked about the juice from Tennessee, Indiana, whatever. Just talk to us, talk to the folks listening. What is the Washington, like the climate, like what does that do to the whiskey? What does that do to the juice? What is your guys'? Do y'all do something different? Because everybody knows you here in Kentucky, and everybody you've got rick houses, and we move the barrels top to bottom. It's summer heat.
We have 4 seasons,
cold winters, 4 seasons, whatever. So out there in Washington State, it's climate's quite a bit different than what it is here in Kentucky, and in all over, and all over the place, all over states that produces different juice, bourbons, whiskey. So just walk us through that. Like, what is that like? What does that do for the product?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is my favorite part to talk about when we're talking about Woodinville whiskey. And this is, I think, so as if you didn't already know that I'm a big talker, we're gonna really get into it now. Because I think, first of all, part of what endears me to Woodinville, or to where we're just at in the conversation about American whiskey, is we are now talking about regional differences. We are talking about a spirit that once was a single region, Kentucky, that is now a national spirit, as it always had a right to be. No matter how many people will say bourbon has to come from Kentucky, and that's not people in the whiskey world. That's more like the casual fan. But this is a great time to be a part of this conversation. This is a new conversation that we get to have, and we get to help shape in a similar way that we can talk about the regional differences of single malt scotches. So what is a Pacific Northwest bourbon versus a Kentucky bourbon versus Northeast versus the South? They're all making bourbon now. And what is it that, the differences in the glass? Sure, we could talk about, we can taste. We've already brought up the citrus notes, the apple notes, the rye being a different type of spice. But what is it actually when we're there at the place where it's actually being created that it imparts those flavor differences in the glass? Well, for Woodinville whiskey, we, of course, like I've said multiple times, are working only with heritage grains to Washington State. Those are all being grown. Our core grains, our bourbon and our rye, are all being grown by a single family farm, the Omlin family. So the Omlin family, a multi-generation family of farmers, Arnie Omlin, 3rd generation, running the farmland. Back in 2010, when Brett and Orlin approached him, he didn't really see a path forward for farming in Washington. He thought that that the farm was going to end with him, or at least it was going to no longer be in the Omlin family name. So his son Joel, who was, really had it in his blood to be a farmer, he told him to find a different line of work. So Joel ended up in Denver working in the medical field. Then Brett and Orlin approached Arnie to start growing the grain that we have in our glass. They're heritage grain. They have been cultivated for years to really excel in the Washington climates. And like we have said, they lend a different flavor profile. They're non-GMO. It's baker's grade rye. And we're talking Quincy, Washington now, which is 3 hours inland of the Cascade Mountains. when we talk Woodinville, that's about 30 minutes away from Seattle, Bellevue, all the places that you may know when you think about Washington State. And it is overcast year-round, and it has been raining every single time I've ever visited there. And everyone's in flannel, and it's super lush and green. But when we think of Quincy, that's 3 hours over the Cascades. Every time you drive from Woodinville to Quincy, you're seeing every season. I've seen snow at the top of the Cascade Mountains in July. And then on the other side, it becomes super lush. But then as you go inland, it's very arid. It has incredibly hot summers, incredibly cold winters, temperature fluctuations through the days that are very similar to Kentucky, actually. So it ends up being a phenomenal place to age your whiskeys, which is just a lucky thing that, you know, Brett, Orlin, and the Omlins discovered over time. Because at first, we were aging our whiskeys, our barrels, at the distillery. But as we continued to expand, Arnie had the idea to build rickhouses on his farmland because he had the space for it. And now, as we're expanding further, we're building our rickhouses there. And it turns out to be a beautiful place to age our whiskeys. So we're single-story rickhouses, 6 bottles high, no climate control other than an oscillating fan. Really allows for the distillate to extract a lot of phenomenal flavor from the barrels. Now, if we're going back over to Woodinville, when we talk about in the distillation process, what makes Woodinville special as kind of, I shy away from using the word terroir too frequently because that's really more of a wine term and very French, you know, and we're kind of, you know, we're the rugged U.S. whiskey world at the end of the day, but, you know, we're working with water straight from the Cascade Mountain Reservoir. It's incredibly soft water. There's very little mineral in it to begin with, so it allows us to use water that has to undergo very little filtration. And we're through our fermentation distillation process. And then we're also, like we said, around all of those amazing wineries. So what is the ambient yeast? What is the natural yeast, the native yeast in the air that's helping inform our fermentation? So these are those like unquantifiable things that do the terroir, that do kind of, you know, shape the whiskey in our glasses. So that's a very long answer for your very short question.
you weren't excited to say that
No.
one at all, and we say
Right, I know.
here all the time.
You do? Cool. Yeah.
I do. Well, because I say that because, like, when you're talking about grain grown in, you know, Louisiana or wherever, or up in the Northeast where you're at, say, you know, I've talked to people in Vermont, you know, Caledonia and stuff. Like, that's a whole different rye up there. You know, a whole different climate that the rye is going through than it is out where y'all are at. And then obviously here in Kentucky, even different parts of Kentucky's got different weathers. Like all that goes into so much. And like when you were talking about the regional aspect of it all, it's true. Like that is what has blown my mind. The whole process through all this is how different farming is in different places and all that it can create in some amazing products.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's an exciting time to have this conversation because it does.
Yeah.
I mean, Northeast rye is amazing. Pacific Northwest rye is amazing. They're amazing for completely different reasons, you know?
Yeah. I love it that it's non-GMO. Like that's key. Really is. Like I love it. That's good.
And when we talk about, you know, go for it. Let's do it.
Oh, go for it. No.
No, I was just going to say really quick, just let's do it.
And then as we pour, you can talk.
Let's do it. I told you I was going to try and hit it all. I just wanted to talk a little on our distillation process, just because that's really special for Brett and Orlin too, you know? Like the small batch craft distillery, we are working with glycol chill on our fermentation tanks. We're cutting heads and tails by taste and by smell. All these things that you can only do in like a tiny craft distillery. And I think that imparts, you know, what the end product as well. So anyway, now please go ahead, introduce this last whiskey.
No, but you did we're gonna get to that last pour here in a second on the introduction, but I love that about craft distilleries because to me, they're a lot like craft breweries. Like you never saw Budweiser doing anything and Miller Lite doing anything crazy until all these craft breweries really got big enough, and not just one or two, but multiples got big enough that they were doing wild things, and they were like, uh-oh. Now, granted, a lot of things are starting to come back down, and craft beer coming back to the norm, so to speak. But with craft distillers, so much more wiggle room than with a ginormous company that's only looking at very certain things. And I'm guessing that's what allowed this next pour to maybe come about, a finished pour. Can you talk about it? I'm not even going to try to say it because Brandon will laugh at me. No, not even going to try to say it.
Do it. The fans want it. The fans, our listeners.
I said
they want it.
with an yeho, and I hadn't even had a drink. I've had 3 drinks already. It's not going to happen.
You know what? It doesn't matter. This is, you got to get over your fears, okay? This is it. Like,
Sauternes?
Just say it.
Yeah.
Was that close?
Yeah, very close.
See?
Yeah.
There you go. Good job.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a wine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, we had to Google it for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's a dessert wine, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is our Sauternes cask finish straight bourbon. So this is that flagship bourbon that, we started off with that then is finished in a Sauternes cask after its 5 years of aging. So you're right on the money. Sauternes is a sweet wine, a dessert wine, coming from, Sauternes is the regions, coming from Bordeaux, and, predominantly the grapes that are used for Sauternes is a white dessert wine, sweet wine. So we're talking like Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, Muscadel. And it's, at the end of the day, Sauternes is one of those regions where botrytis or noble rot happens naturally. It occurs regularly, and that's that thing where the grapes more or less rot on the vine to a place where the sugar becomes more concentrated. So then in the fermentation process, there's residual sugar that leads to really delicious honeyed dessert wines. And I think that's all going to come through on the way that it's finished on our bourbon.
So I'm going to preface this because Brandon probably won't tell on himself. Brandon is not the biggest finished bourbon lover.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Why? I want to know. I'm always curious.
All right. So, in my experience,
I've given him a lot.
I've had a lot of different products, different variations of whiskeys or bourbons that has been finished in whatever it is. And most of them they fall short. Like they're not good. They're not, I don't know if they're done the right way or whatever it is, but it's just not my thing. It's just not my jam. Like I always just give it to me straight. Like whether it's just, just a straight bourbon whiskey, different mash bill, distilled, let's drink it. Right. It's just not my jam where I like different types of juices being, I don't know, you put it into whatever cask, wine cask or whatever it is. Just now again, it's, there is a few that has been okay. It's been good, but for the most part, it's just, I like it. Just give it to me right down the middle. Like whatever the mash bill is, age, proof, whatever it is.
He's snobby.
But no, that's not snobby. No, actually, snobby would be going the other way, in my opinion. But we're not going to go there. But I will say, I think this is really good. No, I'm not going to lie. Like, and I'm not just being nice or saying that, just whatever. I think it's really good. I think it smells really good. I think you get the essence of the whiskey, along with the, you can actually, I kind of get a little subtle on the back end of the nose, you get that subtle sweetness, the wine smell, like as you do, like you said, like a Sauvignon Blanc or um, or Pinot Grigio, whatever it is. Yeah,
But I feel
like
like you still some of that rye baking spice still comes
yep,
through
it
in like a
does.
nice way. And the
It
reason
does.
Josh I also prefaced with him with that is because if he does give a compliment, that is a very high compliment if he likes it.
Yeah. I don't know. I just now again, like there's I like there's some port finishes out there that I enjoy, but I mean for the most part, it's just give it to me straight. Like don't gotta
But
finish it anything,
on
but
this one, I don't feel like the
I
finish
don't.
overtakes everything,
It
and I
doesn't.
think that's probably why you enjoy it, Brandon. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Can you kind of say how long? I mean, was it a quick hit, long hit in the cask? How big are those casks? Are they the typical 53? Or are they the 200 or whatever that some of those wines come in?
So it's I think that these are like more along the 66. They're just slightly bigger than 53. I may be off on that, but it's not. They weren't they're not the big pipes, the big like 100 200s. And then no, I can't say how long it's been finished for, but I think in general, Brett is the mastermind behind these. He's always very thoughtful with the duration of the finishing. It's usually I would say, and this is more my opinion than like kind of, I think maybe like what he would say, it's more on the subtle side. So like he will pull it from the finished barrel, in general under 4 months, without going like, you know, this one I can't say either way, but in general I think that it's nice to have an influence without overtaking, like you guys have said. So
Yeah.
And I think that's
And,
what I
and
like about it.
yeah, and like John said, like normally the reason why I don't like it is because it does overpower, the true
Well,
juice of the whiskey or bourbon. And when it does that, it just creates this funky taste, and I don't,
mhm.
just something I don't
or
enjoy. But
or it's
this is
used
done right.
to mask
Correct.
inferior product.
Correct.
But if you're putting a
Correct.
5-year in this, that's already your flagship. That's not an inferior product.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of folks do that. Like they try to like mask their product with it because maybe it's super young or whatever it is, and um, but to say that this is really good and I enjoy it. Like this is like it
Thank
smells really nice. It's got a really really good nose to it, and I think it's super smooth, and I think it drinks a little bit under its proof. I talk about stuff punching above weight, but I think this being at 105, I think this drinks, between that 95 and 98.
you. Mm.
I
To
feel
me,
like what you were saying earlier, Josh, of what you guys like to do is it rounds it out to me. Like
hmm
Mhm.
it's not, and I think that's kind of probably maybe taking off that burn on that edge, but you still get those the high rye flavors with a hint of that grape, those notes, and it's rounded off. Like you know what I mean? Like not,
Mhm.
it's not gonna harshly linger. It's just this nice
yeah,
finish, and
right.
I love that. And you guys talk about doing other finishes. I know you do port. You even do applewood staves. I mean, clearly, y'all
Oh,
have
what?
a fondness of doing a finish.
Mhm. Yeah, and in general, I think finishing American whiskeys, finishing bourbons, finishing ryes, this is again a very young practice.
Yep.
Obviously, single malt Scotch, Irish whiskey, this is something that has been a large part of those categories for a significant amount of time. Um, and so I think, like, again, we're talking about early goings of another conversation. What is how does a finishing best serve American whiskeys, best serve bourbons? And I think that there's a lot of experimentation that is
hmm
going on right now. And I think that you guys, hit the nail on the head. It's not about masking the whiskey. It's about elevating the inherent, characteristics of the whiskeys, right? So when we're talking about this Sauternes cask, for me, our rye has a really beautiful tropical fruit note, a little bit of like, banana, pineapple, kiwi. I think the Sauternes really pulls that out of it on the palate. It has a little bit of that raisinated note on the nose, which you're going to expect from a dessert wine. But on the palate, it's elevating what's already inherent in our core range. And I think that that's something that, Brett and Orland work really closely on. They are willing to experiment with pretty much any finishing, but it needs to make sense for the base ingredient. It needs to make sense for our whiskeys. So yeah, our applewood is phenomenal. It's our straight bourbon finished with toasted applewood staves. It's on the national market. I highly recommend you picking up a bottle if you find it. It's not as hard to find as like say the 8-year. But again, we already brought up when we were tasting our core bourbon that there is apple inherently on the nose, on the palate. So just to elevate that with toasted applewood staves makes a ton of sense for me. And then they're always going to experiment. There's always going to be something down the line. I'm sure you're going to ask next, what's the next finish that's going to come to market? I'm not going to tell you. I already gave you the 8-year, 9-year. But otherwise,
just a hint. Like you ain't got to tell us something. Like we don't even know
wait.
secret information. But
is it a wine finish?
Or can you tell us off the air? Can you tell us off the air?
Sure, let's say that.
Man.
Yeah. Sworn to secrecy.
Right.
By the way, I've never heard of anybody, and if I have, I forgot about it, doing somebody in apple, whiskey, or just a juice in apple staves. Like I don't know of anybody that does that, especially around here. John, do you? I've never heard of that.
No, that's why I mentioned the applewood because it's to me that's something totally different. But
it is
like you said, pulling out the flavors makes so much sense. Like there's a purpose to it. It's not just to do it. There's a purpose to it.
That's why that I'm not going to mention them, but you mentioned them earlier, Josh. There's a major conglomerate here in Kentucky that's why they started doing the play with the staves, right? They're starting to pull out trying to extract all the different flavors from the juice. And it makes sense. It's just, historically, in my experience, it just, a lot of them has fell short. But this does. And this is good. I really enjoy it. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to have a second pour. I'm going to have a second pour.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, and while he has that second pour, obviously you told us about that 9-year coming next year. I'm not going to press you too much on anything new release because clearly you told us that's not going to happen. So the next question then would be is if folks want to head out to Washington, beautiful place, by the way. If you haven't been out to Washington, you need to go out there. The Pacific Northwest is awesome. What can they expect when they hit the distillery?
It's really an amazing distillery tour. I'm not going to lie. I enjoy it every time I do it, and I do it a lot, because it really is there's no holes in the story, and there's no secrets. There's no man behind the curtain. You see everything from the milling through the distillate coming off of the stills. And then there's, some of these limited releases that are never going to make it to the national market are available for you to taste in the tasting room. So many of the people that are part of our production, including Mike Stein, who's our general manager, have been with Woodinville for, since its inception or for at least 10 years. So these are people that live and breathe this whiskey day in and day out, and they're still so passionate about it every day that when they are speaking to this whiskey and to the process of creating this whiskey, you can't help but, get inspired by it. So you really are seeing, if you get there early enough, which I don't recommend because it's like 6 a.m., you'll see the grain literally showing up, And then from the grain through to the pure distillate, you will get every single step of the process. And Brett's there every day. Orland's there every day. There's a really good chance that you're going to, just have a great conversation with someone who's just as passionate about whiskey as you are. And like I already mentioned, Woodinville is a really fun place to visit anyway. There's a ton of wineries in the area. There's a ton of great food. It's only 30 minutes from Seattle, so it's like a day trip. So if you have a Seattle trip in your future, this is well worth spending half a day or a day,
Nice.
getting the Uber out there for.
Nice. So how big is, the distillery? Like, how many rick houses, how many employees you got? Just kind of give a general overview of how big the operation is.
Yeah, so we're at 5 rick houses now, but those again are out in Quincy, which, you're welcome to visit, but that's in the middle of nowhere, 3 hours away from, more or less civilization. But if you ever find yourself like catching a concert at the Gorge, which is kind of a fun spot, outdoor concert venue, you're not far from it then. But otherwise, I would say we're always expanding. Not that anything has changed about our production. There's probably about 40 people total working on this whiskey now, from planting the seeds through to slapping a label on the bottle. Because our bottling plant is right on the farm where our rick houses are as well.
Okay.
And then, we have 4 fermentation tanks, 3 copper pot stills.
Okay.
We are working with non-continuous distillation, but we are doing 24-hour distillation at this point. So it's growing, but we're still tiny. We put out less whiskey in a year than most of the big guys put out in a week.
And
It's good whiskey.
and there's nothing wrong with that, honestly. I mean, there's, like you guys are just on that upward mic drop. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's coming. Like
Oh,
especially
thank
with
you.
the Founders Fund, like you said, like, and then the 100 proof 8 year, like that's,
And by the way, if you go sniff that glass, it
I
still
know,
smells fantastic.
I know. See, that's what I like to do. Like that's I don't, Josh, I don't know if you do this. I'm sure you do, but I like to take my favorite pours of the night, and when I finish the glass, just go back, let it set out in open air,
Mhm.
and go back and nose it,
Mhm.
and it's just, I don't know, you make a candle out of it, I guess, but it's wonderful.
Hey, we got candles at the distillery. So there you
Yes,
go.
let's go.
Oh man.
Let's go.
Oh,
Let's go.
Josh.
No,
this
we need
is-
to get out there,
is-
John. Seriously.
You guys really
we
should.
do. Well, hey,
No, we should.
we were in Vancouver this summer, and we
Yeah.
didn't head south. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but Josh, man, this has been a blast. These pours were fantastic.
Yeah.
And folks, I know the 8-year, it's sold out. I'm sure there's a bottle out there somewhere. If you can find it, go for it. And if
Please.
you can't, the flagship.
John,
is
John,
well
show
worth
you
it.
got John. Show the bottle one more time so they can find it, because that's a gem right there.
And
Yep.
you guys are doing some amazing stuff, and I can't wait to
Yep.
see what's next with the 8-year rye, the 9-year limited release, and so much more that you got coming. And Josh, thanks.
That's
for
what I'm excited
letting
about.
us empty our glass.
That's what I'm excited about.
Nice.
That's what
And you
I'm
could-
excited about.
We just launched our online shop on our website, so you can, whatever is not entirely sold out that we've drank tonight, you can probably purchase through the website now. I think we're shipping to almost all states at the moment, so there's that too.
Even better. Even better.
Yeah, yeah.
See,
Yo,
great note to leave on. Like I said,
Yeah.
always coming through. Always coming. coming through.
Yeah, right.
I do appreciate you sharing the pours, and man, they were some good ones.
Yep. Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys. Thanks for your time tonight, and yeah, thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.